Welcome back
Great.
to the Sacred Places podcast to speak about Sussex. In your latest book, The Long Man and Friends, you go into detail on the sacred places of Sussex beyond the Long Man. And you live in Sussex, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to Seeking Noumena. I'm your host, Elise Wells, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through noumena, or sacred sites, around the world and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the fairies. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call?
So you've spent a good bit of time exploring these places. That's what I do in Greece as well, as I dive into the sacred sites we have that people are familiar with, mostly around Delphi. My work is on the mainland. And with that work, I've also found a lot of unexcavated archaeological sites that we have record of. We know they're oracle sites. Sometimes they've been excavated, but only over a 3-day period, over 100 years ago. So it's this great gift because they're preserved by the land. They're not developed upon. They're very accessible. We, as spiritual practitioners, can go there and take our time experiencing them. There's not a ticket entrance and a timed entry or anything like that. But there's also the sadness that they've kind of been forgotten. So that's always something I war with in the work I do in Greece with those land spirits. How was it writing this book and really deciding which places to put in? Were there any places hidden like that you were like, oh, I think I'm the first one to put this down on paper?
Well, the way it happened was I'm a Londoner by birth, as it were. I grew up in London. And then when I was about 35, I moved to Sussex, which I already knew because my grandparents on my father's side lived in Sussex, just nearby from here, in Brighton, near Brighton. And my grandparents on my mother's side were in nearby Hampshire, which is the county next door. So I was familiar with the territory. And in fact, I went to Sussex University for a term before becoming a dropout, and I'm going to live in Ireland and then doing university, 10 years later at UCL in London. But I came here when I was 35, and about a year after being here, an old mentor, a wonderful spiritual mentor of mine, who was in his 90s, died. I got a phone call from Sofia. He was in Bulgaria. I used to go to Bulgaria every year in the spring and have a little kind of retreat, and he would teach me. And I got a phone call saying he died, and I went out to say a prayer for him on a little sacred hill behind the house. And as I stood on the hill and I said a prayer, wishing him a safe journey to the other world and all the rest of it, I just had this kind of, I say that the hill spoke to me, and it wasn't like the hill had a big hilly voice and spoke like this. It was like a telepathic, when you just know that it's not coming from you, it's coming from over there or over there, or from this tree or from that bird. Just so from deep in the earth beneath me, it said, go on a journey, walk to the long man. And the long man is, I always forget how far away it is. It's something like 12 miles away, I think, across the landscape. Go on a pilgrimage. So I did that. I set off and I walked on the land, and then I wrote about it. And I wrote about Druidry kind of woven into the story of the walk. And it's called the Druid Way. And this was probably, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that. And then I was invited to give workshops on sacred Sussex. And I said to the lady who invited me, I said, well, I feel a bit, I'm not sure I can do that. I mean, I've only just recently come to live here. I've had this experience of the walk, that's why she invited me, because she read the book and loved it. But, I'm not somebody who has lived there all their lives. But she said, no, no, please do it, you see. So we put the workshop on, and I figured what I'd do is I'd get people who were living here to tell their stories. It obviously kind of touched a nerve because every time we put it on and it would oversubscribe. So we'd create a second date and that would be oversubscribed. And we did that 5 times. So we put another date on it, oversubscribed, onto the next date, onto the next date, onto. And what I did is I set up the room with, I had sort of various images from the local landscape. And I had some old Sussex folk music playing as people arrived. And then I sellotaped together maps of Sussex ordnance survey maps, a really detailed map. And it was a big room, so you'd have about, if you can imagine, about 30 people all sitting in a big circle with this big map of the land. And I would kind of welcome everybody, introduce people, and introduce us, and then say, go inside now. Just think about times when you felt the need to go somewhere special. Maybe somebody's just died, or something very sad has happened, or something very happy has happened, or you just feel like, where do you go? Is there like do you have a favorite spot that kind of elevates you and helps you to go beyond the everyday and all the rest? And then people would tell their stories. And somebody would say there's this hill where there's this story about, and then they'd tell a little piece of folklore or myth. And I would make a note of all this. So I had about 5 rounds of doing this over a year. And I gradually built up an understanding in addition to what I'd already researched, because I researched for the book, The Druid Way. So I built up a lot of stories and a lot of places, which I then started to visit myself. And then just a couple of years ago, the publisher who publishes these very sweet little kind of hardback books, they're the paperback sized, but they're hardbacks, and they're sort of beautifully made. So there's something about a book when it's beautifully made. That's what the internet can't give us,
Oh yeah.
And and it uses kind of woodcuts and a map, and he said, will you write a book about sacred Sussex and magical places? So I did, and I invited a friend of mine, David Bramwell, to work with the project. And we came up with 9 walks. We made kind of magical walks, because there's nothing, I don't know if you have this in the States, but here you have like the local magazines, and they'll say, what's your favorite thing to do? Like, what will you do? And, one of my favorite things is, like, on a weekend, is go on a magical walk, somewhere beautiful that has some interesting magical associations or spiritual associations in some way, and maybe having, in Britain we have, the pub, the English pub, and the Irish pubs as well, and so on. But it's like a thing, and you have like a Sunday lunch there or something like that. And so we came up with 9 magical walks where we linked together magic places, sacred places.
That's
and then
fantastic.
present those with maps.
Yeah. And I love that because it invites people to think about where they can, if they can come to Sussex for it, where they can build their own walks. And also, hopefully, it helps them plan their pilgrimage route. Pilgrimage is something we use that term a lot, I think, in the spiritual community, often enough. But people don't often think about it for its true meaning, which is a walk. It is literally your feet, a staff, maybe some materials, and you set out on that walk. How do you think that differs for people compared to, calling it a pilgrimage, but they're really going to fly somewhere and then get in a car and go that way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I've been on those kind of pilgrimage tours, or sometimes I'm asked to lecture on or give a talk or presentation to a group of people who've come over on a kind of pilgrimage, and they go to Glastonbury and Stonehenge, and in a coach, and
In a
then they
coach,
fly up to heaven,
exactly.
and
And they squeeze in a
and
lot.
they squeeze in a lot, and I have to be very careful here, because I can be quite cynical about this. I mean, I totally get it, and I don't want to disparage anybody who does this, but I don't think it's quite the same. I mean, I think if you really want the effect of a pilgrimage in its deepest sense, ideally, I mean, obviously, if you can't, well, if you have difficulty walking, it's kind of not, but if you can walk, then to do a walk. I mean, I did a pilgrimage 2 weeks ago, where we just started off in this little church about 20 miles away called Berwick, which is particular because it's painted by the Bloomsbury set, which these artists in the 1930s, and they filled this church with paintings of flowers and the four seasons, and it's just a very, very lovely place. And it's right next to an old long barrow. So the
Mm.
pre-Christian past and the Christian past, are together there in this place. And it's part of it's sort of connected by ley lines. It's part of a whole line of ancient churches and we walked from that one to another church that had this very unusual feature of a pilgrim bell, which is very rare, where you walk in and there's a, I don't know what, there's a name for it, but the hammer thing that you hit and you're invited to hit the bell and you go bang like that, and then you walk on to the next one, and we ended up in the third one in that line, and it was about 4 hours walk, and you felt fabulous afterwards. And then we had a little ceremony at the end, and then a meal together, you know and you feel something's changed. You've accomplished something. You feel healthier. You feel spiritually kind of cleansed or changed in some way. Yeah, and I think what's lovely about it as a I'm kind of involved in the work of something called the British Pilgrimage Trust, which has done a great deal of work to make pilgrimage a concept or an idea that appeals to people of any religion and none. So that kind of so to take away any kind of sense of ownership by a particular religion on it. In Britain, this work of the work of freeing oneself of repression and of authoritarianism, it seems to be like an ongoing thing at every level, whether you're dealing with it in your own internal psychology in terms of freeing yourself from enchaining beliefs that came because of your childhood or because of your cultural conditioning, or whether you're talking about it at a political level around you, or whether, a peculiarity of living in Britain is that Henry VIII, when was that? Like, I don't know, 350 years ago, so, made pilgrimage illegal. It was outlawed. And most people don't know that. Most people in Britain, if you say, did you know that this was rendered illegal by King Henry VIII? They don't know that. And so it was part of
Which
his
makes sense.
Reformation.
Exactly, yeah. The monasteries were gone, and so where would the
Yeah,
pilgrims
yeah,
go?
yeah, exactly. Because there used to be all these pilgrimage routes, and then people, like I guess everything humans do, it became kind of tainted with money in the sense that, or greed, so that these places became commercial centers, which on the one hand was good because there was kind of art was funded by that and incredible architecture and all the rest of it. But it also was kind of commerce. That explains why in Glastonbury, for instance, if you go to Glastonbury today, you'll see the graves or the places of the burial of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere, and that was entirely made up because when after the Reformation, where everything was destroyed, the whole area lost its income, so they had to build the income back. So they discovered, in quote, King Arthur and Queen Guinevere's body and built some tombs, and then kind of built the traffic back up after King Henry had gone, and they could start tempting people back onto the pilgrimage routes again. So there were these, there was that repression in the past, and so the British Pilgrimage Trust is one organization kind of rehabilitating that, encouraging people to do it in whatever way works. And the fact is, you can make you can make little micro pilgrimages around your garden, or down to the other end of town, or to I think it's really quite interesting to I think you said earlier on this idea of everywhere being sacred is to also not get caught in the trap of spiritual materialism, which is kind of what happen on commercialized sort of new age pilgrimages, where you're going to get stuff, you're getting experiences, you're getting the photographs, you're getting the memories, and whereas actually you want to kind of go deeper than that. And funnily enough, by doing a pilgrimage where there isn't necessarily an overt, you're not walking to a particular sacred site or church or whatever. You're going for a walk just in the countryside around you or into your own town, but with a certain kind of open, mindful mindset. I think there's value in that too.
If somebody was going to Sussex to do a pilgrimage and they only had, one that they could do or one site to start at, and what would you recommend them to start with? Like, I guess the Long Man is one to start with, but I'll let you pick.
Yeah. Well, it is indeed the Long Man. I mean, that's why the book's called The Long Man and Friends.
I
Uh,
love that
you know,
title.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? The publisher had this idea. It was his title. It was great. I think the Long Man is a great place to start. It's a kind of yeah. It's. I wish I could quickly think of another one. Well, I tell you what. Okay, I'd think of another one. Holywell in Eastbourne. I would go along the coast to Eastbourne, where there's this place called Holywell, and walk over the top of the cliffs, towards the Long Man. And you have this fantastic walk, and then you'd kind of drop down into this area which is called, you're on a path, on a trackway that will lead you to Stonehenge eventually, if you've got about, I don't know, 3 days to spare. But otherwise, you drop down after a few hours, you drop down into what was called the Hundred of Avranel. And the Hundred of Avranel, they would divide things up into area called hundreds. And the Hundred of Avranel, like Avalon in Glastonbury, but Avranel is where the Long Man lives. And as you drop down, you'd have the sea behind you. You'd look the other way, and you'd see a kind of great, vast flatland leading up to some more hills and those would be the North and the South Downs. You'd be on the South Downs, just by the sea, and you'd be looking across at what was called the Waste of Ondred, which was full of bears and wolves and brigands, and which is why the trackways were up on the top of the hills, because it was safer to walk along the top. Down there, it was swampy, it was forested. You had bears, you had wolves, you had brigands, and then you would look across to the other hills, which are the North Downs. And then beyond that, you've got London beyond that. And you drop down and you come to the Long Man, this incredible figure, And then you'd have a choice. You could end your pilgrimage there. You would have had a great walk of about 4 hours or something. Or you could carry on, and you could take advantage of a system that they've started to do, which we did the other day, which is these local churches allow you to spend the night in them.
Oh,
So
wow.
you take a backpack, and I thought it was going to be incredibly uncomfortable. I did take a very comfortable mattress thing, and a really warm sleeping bag. But they have because they have toilets and little kind of cooking facilities in these churches.
Oh my goodness.
So you're in this ancient place, often really close or part of an ancient site, because Christianity built on paganism and pre-Christian tradition. So they're kind of mixed together, and you're sleeping there. And then you can spend the night and then move on the next day. And then luckily, with again the tradition of pubs, you'll have a nice pub. So if you get to the Long Man, there's the Long Man Inn, which is a lovely pub. You can stay the night there if you want to go up market. You stay the night in the inn, or you sleep in the church, and then you carry on. And amazingly, there's this guy who decided to get rid of all his possessions. I mean, to sell, to do this permanently. I think he's finally settled in Glastonbury, but he came and stayed the night with us about a year ago. Amazing guy, and he sings for his supper. He literally sings for his supper, and he's written a book about it. And he would just go into the local town, and he knew all these old folk songs. And he'd sing, and of course he had amazing adventures. People get talking to him and say, come and stay at my place. I've got a bit of gardening to do. Do you want to help, clear up my garden? And so he'd stay, a few days or a week with them and help them with some odd jobs. And he'd have a bed and he'd have food. And then he'd walk to the next village and sing. And maybe he'd have to sleep outside. He's a tough guy. And in fact, he kept a video blog post of it. Somehow he managed to keep up with his tech. And
Yeah.
there's some glorious little films he's made of his journeys, and he wrote a book about it.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, what's the book? I have to know now.
Um,
Or his name.
his name is Will Parsons.
And is that the British Pilgrimage Trust website?
Well, no, he started it with a friend, and then they
Yeah, because I remember a Druidcast episode from a long while ago. I actually listened to it on a pilgrimage I was just on in Crete. I did a long walk, and I was listening to that episode.
and wasn't it a great presentation?
It's
They
fantastic.
Fantastic. They burst into song, and yes, it was kind of one of those sad things. They kind of split up. They kind of
Oh,
They both started the British Pilgrimage Trust. They kind of fell out with each other. So now there are two organizations. There's British Pilgrimage there, you see, pilgrim.com and the British Pilgrimage Trust. He should, well, if you Google it, you'll find his book. And then Will Walking, let's have a look on his YouTube. If you click on the
Oh, here it
YouTube,
is. Singing for Our Supper, Walking an English Songline from Kent to Cornwall.
that's right. And then you've got Will Walking. If you click on the YouTube thing, you'll see all his little.
As
Oh,
I
is that?
come in by Philip's side.
You'll see Will Walking. You'll see his. I saw one. There's a video there of a storage truck, and he's putting all his possessions in there and then setting off. It's worth watching those little clips. It's a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he sounds more daring than I ended up being. One of the first things I was called to do in Greece was to do the Delphic pilgrimage well, you can do it from a lot of places. It's almost a Camino of sorts, but it has
Yeah.
not been maintained in about 1800 years, 1600
Wow.
years. And there are wolves, there are wild packs of dogs. And a friend
Mm.
of mine did one night out there, and she actually had an experience. She thinks it was Hermes himself, the god of pilgrimage.
Yeah.
A man came in a running outfit, and he didn't stop running like in place the whole time he was speaking to her. And she woke up early the next morning. She slept in a high tree because literally there's like these dangerous animals everywhere.
Wow.
And she was 20 years old and like just very small girl. Like it really was a dangerous thing. When I heard she did this, I was like, oh my gosh. This man says, we protected you last night, but you'll need to leave today after you see the sanctuary of Delphi. Have a
Wow.
safe
Wow.
trip home. And he didn't stop running. And when she watched him run away, he just was all of a sudden gone. Like he was
Wow.
running away, but he was maybe 8 feet away, and all of a sudden he wasn't there.
It's
And
just
she's very sure it was Hermes himself, and she's not somebody to just kind of throw that around.
yeah. How amazing. And have you done any of that part of the pilgrimage? Have you done a little bit of it or?
A little bit, like with my car, I'll park side in, some Olive Grove and then go for the adventure. There's a pilgrimage I think we've lost the full path of it. But in Mount Helicon, where the muses were born, it's really there's 9 muses. There's really 9 peaks to this mountain range that we call Helicon.
Yeah.
And it kind of, the basin of these mountains do come together in a heart. There's a heart to that. So I've been able to locate the heart of this. It's just olive groves as far as the eyes can see. And then you get a few native pines that sprout up but mostly it's olives. And some are farmed, some are abandoned. So I think I've been kind of guided by the land to understand that there was a pilgrimage there at some point in ancient times, but I haven't
Hmm.
found enough record of it to go tracking it down. But
How fantastic. Have you done any work on trying to find chakra systems in the earth?
oh, it's funny you say that. I almost called it the heart chakra of the mountain because yes, I have
Yeah.
felt that. And in Greece particularly, it's a serpent. Like we talk about Kundalini and chakra.
Yeah.
Greece really has a serpent tradition that
Right.
you feel it in the land, and it does guide you to different, like the chakras have an association. Root is not just roots of self, it's our ancestors, it's lineage, it's grounding. You do feel that in different places in Greece, and then you can feel other chakra points that, yes, I do believe they were
Yeah.
along a pilgrimage route.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I'm doing a course with the Shift Network in starting next week,
Oh,
where we're kind of exploring this relationship between the land and the chakras. There are places that are definitely kind of root chakra places, and then there are crown chakra places, aren't there? I mean, and heart chakra. Yeah, and there are particular places on the earth that seem to do that and so on. Yeah, yeah,
Delphi is that way, like, because it's Mount Parnassos, but
yeah.
Delphi's site where it's built, like the Temple of Apollo, is on, I should know this, I think the north side. And on the direct opposite side, but it's about a 45-minute drive because of how huge and winding these mountain roads are. And the hiking is currently impossible because of the way the UNESCO archaeological site has sort of blocked it off. But I know there was a more direct route to the Carisian cave. So if we were the size of the gods, we
Mm.
could peek around the mountain to see both the feminine Carisian cave, which predates Delphi as an Apollo oracle site by at least 4,000 years. They think around 8,000 years.
Yeah.
And the Python, the Pythia, the Oracle of Delphi is called the Pythia because she is an expression of the Python, which I'm using my quotation marks for those listening. Apollo slew this Python. I don't think there was any slaying involved. I think if anything, we can call that a metaphor for patriarchal Greek culture coming to the fore. But in the Chrysian cave, it's like I would call it a third eye chakra place
Well,
because
place. Yeah.
it's an advanced spiritual site. Like there's not very many sacred sites that truly might be the only one I can think of. There was also a
Have,
Druid spring in France I went to that are advanced. Like really, you might not be ready for them if you're very new to this work.
have you
That's
been
one
to
of them.
Perpericon in Bulgaria?
No, I
Perperic.
have been to Bulgaria. I went to the Valley of the Thracian Kings, and I went to the Rose Festival in
Oh wow.
Kazanlak.
I Kazanlak. Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, yeah. Well, in Perpericon, have a look at that. It's
Oh, I
Perper.
found it.
Yeah, it's in southern Bulgaria, which it would have been Macedonia, I guess, in and it's a an Orphic site that's just
Mm.
fabulous.
I was right around here too. Oh my goodness, how did I miss this? I did a really wild pilgrimage of a different kind from France to Greece with a car all the
Wow.
way up and over.
Oh, good grief. Wow, that's amazing.
It was
Yeah.
really fun and
Yeah.
exciting because I mean there's a lot of ways you can go. So it was a very spirit-led journey of where I was meant to go. So I got to see the entirety of Hungary.
Hmm.
Obviously not the entirety square inch wise, but I went all the way through the country and we stayed at three places, and then I went through Serbia the same way to get to Bulgaria. And that's when I went to the Rose Festival. I capped it with that. That was my destination. So I took about a month and
Yeah.
got there.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, I
Well,
guess I am going back.
if you yeah, yeah, do you Perpericon. I think I did a section on it in this book, Sacred Places, um, because when we went there, we were just knocked out by it. Yes. Anyway, the Oracle of Dionysus, that's what it was.
Hmm. Yeah, that is very Orphic. It's exciting too. Some of the work I've been doing with these less excavated sites. We went to a temple because Dionysus was very present in Delphi as well. Like people think of Apollo as being the only god there, but he was only in residence, I believe it was 7 days after the full moon.
Hmm.
Whereas Dionysius was there the rest of the time, kind of holding that masculine energy. And Artemis was very involved in the rites, Aphrodite and the Graces. People think of it as Apollo exclusive, and that really wasn't a facet in at least ancient Greece, but I think ancient religion in general. I don't think they were so monotheistic the way we assume. Even though we shed that as best we can, like you were saying earlier, I think a lot of people do have these deeper wounds, honestly, of patriarchal sociological programming that is monotheistic based. And so they think, oh, Apollo was there, check. It's like, no, there was a lot more going on. But
Yeah.
Dionysius was really important at a lot of these sites. There's an oracle I went to in Thebes that it just looks like a abandoned park on a hill, but it
Right.
was Ismenios, Apollo Ismenios. And the land, I was able to go into a trance there, and although it was during the day, I was there at maybe 3 p.m. in May, so a very bright, sunny time. I could actually feel that the rites they did there were at night. And I felt that there was a subterranean chamber. And after walking around more, I actually found an entrance
Oh,
after
well.
that to
Yeah.
one. So I actually have a couple of friends in different language groups, someone in Germany, two people in France who are going through the records in their university, their equivalent of JSTOR essentially, to see if there's more than we have in English, because I haven't found anything in English that speaks to that. But we know Dionysius and Apollo were kind of these two halves of the coin. The Orphics blew the lid on that more, but I think it has a prehistoric almost precedent.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for joining me for these important conversations. This was
Yeah.
absolutely fantastic. Everybody can learn more about your work and get these books at philipcar-gomm.com. Druidry.org also has the bookstore there where you can get Sacred Sussex and I believe most of your books and oracle decks that you've created. And BritishPilgrimage.com has some information about Will Parsons, his book Singing for Our Supper. is also available online because I really liked meeting him in a sense on the Druidcast episode. So I'm definitely going to check that out myself. Thank you for sharing that as well.
Pleasure, pleasure. Well, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elise Wells to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.